Welcome, everyone. My name is Jan Kellogg, and I'm here to talk to you about photography. I am coming to you today from the Gaylord Area Council for the Arts, which is located at 125 East Main Street in downtown Gaylord. And these workshops are being brought to you by the Gaylord Arts Council with funding from the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs and the National Endowment for the Arts. So we thank everybody for funding these workshops. There's a series of 10 of them that will be going on this summer and into the fall. So you can check out which ones are coming up by going to www.gaylordarts.org. So today, as I said, I'm going to be talking to you about photography, and I'm going to start off with the fairly easy, fun stuff, and then go to the more complicated, harder technical stuff later, if there's time. So everybody takes photos. Everybody, even tiny children, as soon as they're able to pick up a cell phone and start to learn how to use the buttons, they're taking pictures. But you don't always get the pictures you want. You take pictures and you look at them and you go, that's not really what I saw. That's not really what I wanted to capture. So I'm going to try to help you learn a few tricks so that you get more of the photo that you were after. Everybody always, first of all, wants to know what kind of camera to buy. And that depends. The answer is it depends. Depends on what you want to use the camera for. Do you want to take action pictures, portraits, landscapes? Do you want to be able to do a little bit of everything? What do you want to use the photos for? Are you going to mostly just put them on a website or email them to your friends? Or do you want to print them and make like a big enlargement and frame it? So those factors will determine what kind of camera you get. A big question that you have to ask yourself is how much weight are you willing to carry? And the better cameras are the big ones, big, heavy cameras. Those are the ones that, take, the best pictures, supposedly. But will you carry that camera with you? Or will you think, oh man, that camera's too heavy. I'm just going to take my cell phone, So if you're not willing to lug around this much weight, don't spend the money, just be honest with yourself about what you're willing to do. And, just research this before you buy anything. There's lots of information online. You can find out for any type of camera that you're looking at, what the pros and cons are of that camera. There's basically 4 different types of cameras, and that's not talking about brands or anything. The kind of the high-end camera, so to speak, is the digital single lens reflex, and that's this type of camera. It's a big beast, as you can see, very heavy. There's interchangeable lenses. You can buy lenses that can help you do all different kinds of things. Very expensive. It's expensive to get into. This is the flash. There's so many doodads you can buy with these cameras. It's crazy. The advantage of this is that you get a better picture, a higher resolution picture. It's a kind of a picture that you can enlarge and frame and, enter into a contest or something. But they're expensive. They're heavy. The next kind of camera, which is also ones that more serious photographers use, and they're moving more towards it, is what's called a mirrorless camera. And this video is being taped today on a mirrorless camera, right, Luke? Mm-hmm. And the advantage of those is that they are smaller. They are quite a bit smaller than this. They're lighter, and they still are very, very good cameras if you get the higher end camera. They do a lot of the stuff that this camera would do and more, because the camera companies are moving more towards this type of camera, and they're putting all the new bells and whistles on the mirrorless camera. So it's a great camera if you're just starting out and you're thinking, that you really want to get into photography, you might want to look at the mirrorless camera before you look at single lens reflex. The disadvantage of mirrorless is it's expensive to switch, and that's why I haven't switched that. Yes, as you can see, I have lots of equipment here, and I've got lots more at home. Lots of money sunk into this system, so to switch would be a lot of money. The other kinds of cameras there are the more what would be called the automatic cameras. And kind of a tried and true type of camera is a point and shoot camera or compact camera. This is one that my husband uses. He really likes it. It's great. It's small, fits in your pocket. It's lightweight. It's easy to use. It's got a little bit of a zoom lens on it, which is nice. But these are really becoming more obsolete, I would say, because of this cell phone. Cell phone cameras, up until a few years ago, were not that good. They were great, just to take a little shot of your kids, or a party you're having or something like that. But they weren't, the photos weren't that great. But they are getting much, much, much better now. Again, the companies are putting a lot of money into making cell phone cameras better and better and better. And they're actually pretty decent now. So, and it's the camera you always have with you, right? So you're out and you see something that you really want to take a picture of, boom, take this out of your purse, your pocket, you've got a camera. You may not always have this camera with you. So it's really kind of the thing of the future. They're making them better. Right now, they aren't that great for things like night photography or really zooming out to something. If there's a bird that's really far away and you really want to get a picture of the bird, they're not that great for that. But they're getting better. And in fact, there's some cell phones now that they're saying that they're really good at low light. I haven't seen it myself, but so they're really putting a lot into cell phones. So any camera can take a good or a bad picture. And you're seeing on the screen this PowerPoint that I have prepared for this, and you'll see two examples. One example is what I would consider a good picture that I took with my cell phone, and another example of a bad picture that I took with this single lens reflex camera. It's overexposed. So it's really, taking pictures isn't so much a factor of the camera, it's the operator. You can, a camera is just a tool. You need to learn how to use it and use it right. And you can make mistakes. You can have the best camera in the whole world and take lousy pictures. So you don't really have to have the best in order to take good pictures. So let's get started on some of the tips to taking better pictures. Fall is a great time to take photos. It's one of my favorite times of the year to do photography. And we're coming up on September here pretty quick. So now is be a great time to get your camera out or your cell phone, whatever you want to use, and practice with it. Get ready for fall color. Learn how to use your camera. Learn all the buttons and everything. Read the manual. Who wants to read a manual? But yeah, read the manual. Look up things online to tell you specifically about all the buttons that are on your camera, so you learn how to use it. And practice before the really nice photo opportunities come up. So I'm going to talk a lot about lighting, because lighting is really the key to a good photo. If you have good light, it's almost hard to take a bad picture. So it's good to learn to recognize what light is good light and what light is not. And you'll see a couple pictures here on the screen that show you poor lighting and good lighting. Generally speaking, good during the middle of the day, the lighting is poor, especially on a bright sunny day. It's just way too harsh, and you'll see a picture of a deer I took on a bright sunny day. It's the deer is partially in the shade, and then there's partially bright light, and it's a terrible picture. But another picture on your screen you'll see is what would be considered good lighting. This was taken in Yosemite, which is a great place to take pictures to start with, and that this was right at sundown. So the light is very nice. It's very soft. It's warm. It's the time of night of day when you really want to take good pictures. So the thing to do is to look and see, look at the places you want to take pictures ahead of time and scope it out and figure, well, what's the best time to come back here and take pictures here? You know, maybe the lighting's not great right this minute, but if I come back in the late morning, or if I come back right before sundown, you know, maybe this is a better time for me to come to this spot. Beware of the direction that the light is coming. Overhead lighting, like on a sunny day, like I said, isn't the best. But if the light is coming from the side, that can make a really nice picture, because you'll get the sun shining on one side of the object, and then it'll be in shadow on here, and it'll make the object seem more three-dimensional. And that's a good time to take pictures. Another time that's really, you can get some really cool effects is if something is backlit. So if the light is coming from behind your subject, it lights up the back, and your subject is silhouetted, and so you can see the shape of the subject. And that can be a really neat effect too. Another thing to think about is the color of light. At different times of day, the light records a different kind of image on your sensor. And it's not something that you can see with your eyes. It's something that the camera records, but you can't really tell with your naked eye. So light in the early morning or late in the evening, right before sunset, is very warm and kind of yellow, which tends to make a nice picture. Light during the day, bright sunshine, is very harsh, it doesn't make a good photo. Also, often on an overcast day, the light is way too blue, and it'll record on your camera as being blue. And you'll see on this slide that I took a picture one winter on a very overcast day, and the picture that came out of the camera was bright blue. The snow was just super blue. Of course, snow isn't blue, so it didn't look right. So I was able to correct it in the computer, but that's something that you can correct in the camera. If you look for the settings about white balance, it's called, and there'll be some choices that you have for white balance, and a lot of times there'll be a choice about overcast. So if you hit that overcast setting, it'll take into account that it's overcast, it's going to be too blue, so it will correct that. It will also correct the light that comes from artificial light, like fluorescent light tends to be very green on the camera, and incandescent light tends to be very yellow. So if you go into the white balance settings, you can correct those issues, or like I said, you can correct it afterwards in post-processing. One more minute here. Overcast light can also give you richer colors than a bright sunny light, and that's something that always used to trick me in the fall, especially because you go out on a bright sunny day in the fall, and the leaves are all bright and colorful, and they look great. You take a picture of them, and they look kind of washed out. And this slide that's up right now can show you the difference there. I took these two pictures the same day within like 5 minutes of each other. The first one I took when the sun was out bright, and the picture's kind of really terrible. It's washed out. You have all these harsh colors and shadows and bright spots. It's not a good picture. I waited a couple minutes for the sun to go behind a cloud, and I took a picture, the exact same picture again, and you see it's a much nicer picture. The colors are rich, the shadows aren't too harsh. It's a much better picture. So especially in the fall, it's nice if you can go out on a kind of slightly overcast day. You'll get much more rich colors on your photos than you would on a real bright sunny day. Different weather conditions can give you some really nice photos, especially like stormy weather. If a storm is just coming in or a storm is just going out, foggy weather, different things like that, you can get some very nice effects on your in your photos. And here's a few examples in that slides that I'm showing you. And then the next slide shows it again, stormy light. You can get some beautiful, beautiful effects. The clouds look great, and the ground looks great. The color is nice. It's a nice time to go out, as long as you don't get caught in the storm and get wet or something. There's a trick in a lot of cameras now for dealing with tricky lighting, and it's called high dynamic range, or HDR. And it's a way that you can either manually take several photos of the same scene at different settings. You'll take the scene super overexposed, and then you'll take like 5 or 6 shots super overexposed, kind of overexposed, kind of in the middle, a little bit underexposed, and then really underexposed. And then you can, within your software, you can put them together and make one really nice image. And what it does is it takes the good parts and the bad parts from each shot, and it combines them to make one really nice shot. And almost all newer cell phones will do this for you automatically. And many cameras and many single lens reflex and mirrorless cameras will do that too. It'll automatically take 3 or 5 shots, boom, 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 right in a row at different settings. It'll combine them, and voila, you've got a great picture. So that makes it easier to take good pictures on a day when it may not be, the light may not be the greatest. So here's a couple of examples. The first one is a picture that I took with my big camera here. The picture on top is just the picture that came out of the camera without using HDR, high dynamic range. So it's just one image. The one below it is taking 5 images and combining them in post-processing. And you can see so much more detail comes out of the picture where you combine the 5 pictures together. The dark spots, you can see a lot of detail there. The spot that's real bright is darkened down, and you can see more detail there. So that HDR is a great tool to have. The next example here is an HDR that I took with my cell phone. And this, like I said, it just automatically does it. It's great. The top picture is without the HDR, and the bottom picture is where the camera combined 3 exposures together. And you can see there's more detail there in the window. It's not so bright and overexposed, and the color in the HDR picture is more saturated. The next thing I'm going to talk about is how to control light. And again, if you're out and you're not in the most optimal conditions for taking photos, there's a few things that you can do to make your photos better. And one is using reflectors and diffusers. That's what I brought here. And these are really nifty for taking pictures of small objects like flowers. And I've got here a picture of a flower I took a while back. And the first picture shows what the flower looked like in natural light. And it's not that great of a picture. It's very, the light is really harsh, and then there's some harsh shadows. So it's not very particularly attractive picture. But then I brought out my handy dandy reflector, which is just basically shiny material. You can do it with a piece of aluminum foil. You can do it with a mirror. You can do it with anything that reflects. And take the reflector and put it down beside the flower and get the sun to bounce off the reflective part and bounce into your subject, and it'll make a much nicer picture. Take out the shadows, and it'll be great. And it's pretty easy. You just buy one of these little jobby doos, and they fold up so small. You can put them in your pack. The other thing is a diffuser, and this is just basically it's kind of see-through, basically. You can see through it. You could use a sheet or a real thin piece of material to do the same thing. And all that does is it kind of shadows your object so that if the sun is shining through here and it's real harsh on your subject, you put this diffuser here and it diffuses the light. It kind of scatters the light a little bit and makes it much softer on the subject. So that's a way to control light. Another way is by using flash. And everybody on your camera, whether it's a tiny camera like this or a big camera like this, and even your cell phone, has a flash that you can use to add light to a dark scene. This is a flash that can go on top of my camera here to add light to a scene. And flash is good for something, again, that's not too far away from you. Flash, the light won't travel real far. So don't use your flash in a stadium because it's not going to help. But you can, if you have something that's 5, 10, maybe even 15 feet away from you, and it needs some light onto it in order to make a good picture, you can use a flash. And this example I've got here on the screen shows a picture I took of my cat. And I took a picture. She's behind or in front of a bright window. The first picture I took of her, I didn't use flash, and you can't see the cat. And also, it's a little blurry because I had to use a long exposure. And the light in the outside window is way overexposed, so it's a terrible picture. I put the flash on. I took a picture of it again, and it came out real nice. You can see the cat. And the outside in the window, the exposure is much better. One problem with taking flash into a window, however, or a mirror, anything that's reflective, is when you flash, the light will go out from the flash, it'll bounce off the window, and it'll come right back at you. So you can see on this example, there's a little hot spot above the cat, that's where the flash bounced off the window. So to take care of that problem, I just crop that hot spot out. Voila, great picture. So flash can really help you. The next slide here shows you when not to use flash. Don't try to take flash through a window. So if you're inside your house and you see a deer out in your yard, don't use flash to try to light up the deer, because that flash will just bounce off the window and bounce right back at you and make a terrible picture. And also don't use it when you're far away from your subject. The next thing I want to talk about is camera handling. And I know this may sound kind of simple and maybe even stupid, but really you need to think about when you're taking a picture is holding your camera straight. It's really easy to get your camera off kilter. So when you're taking a picture, look at the background, look at the horizon, and see if it's straight or not. These are two examples I've got up on the screen here. Shows a picture I took of a pelican once, and the pelican is straight, but the horizon is way off. It's way off kilter. I didn't notice that. I was so excited to take a picture of the pelican. The other picture shown of the good example is a picture I took of an eagle, and you can see the horizon behind the eagle is perfectly straight. So take a look at what your horizon is, because that'll show up and it'll ruin a beautiful picture. It'll completely ruin it. Hold your camera steady. Again, that may sound like simple, but it really makes a difference. When you're holding a big camera like this, actually the best thing to do with a big camera like this is to put it on a tripod, because it's so heavy that it's hard to hold it still. So get yourself a tripod to hold a big camera. But it's going to fall over. But if you do have to hold it, if you're going to hand hold it, put your arms in tight to your body, brace yourself, and hold your breath when you take the picture to keep the camera from shaking. Even if you're using a small camera like this or your cell phone, hold it as steady as you can. Really surround your camera with your hand. The camera is right here. The lens is here, so don't cover that up. But hold it as steady as you can. The same if you're holding it like this. Kind of grab it. Hold your arms into your body and press the shutter real gently. Don't stab at it because that moves the camera. A simple thing can make a big difference in the quality of your pictures. Use tripod for long exposures. The example I've got on the screen now shows the difference in taking a picture of a waterfall. The picture on top is I used a really short, fast shutter speed, and that freezes the action of the water, so it makes it real crisp. And then I took the same picture again and used a long shutter speed, and that makes the motion of the water real smooth, which is something I couldn't have gotten if I would have tried to hand hold that, because I need to use a long shutter speed. So tripod can really help you take pictures, the kind of pictures that maybe you've been wanting to take, and you always think, why can't I get that picture? Well, maybe you need to use a tripod so you can get that picture. Focusing, that's another issue. Luckily, our cameras nowadays do the focusing for us. Unless you put it on manual focus, your camera's going to focus on for you, and usually they do a good job. But you have to know where your camera is focusing. Most cameras focus right in the middle of the scene, unless you tell it otherwise. So if your subject is right in the middle, the most important part of the picture is right in the middle, focuses on that, you're fine. But what if the subject is off to the side or farther back in the scene, and it doesn't know that? It wants to focus on whatever's in the middle and towards the front. So experiment with your camera and figure out where it focuses and how to override that if you want to focus elsewhere. So I've got an example up here of a picture I took of my husband, and I've got a chair in the front. I took it with autofocus. It focused on the chair rather than my husband, who's behind. So I overrode where the autofocus was focusing, and I focused on him. He's behind the chair, so it focused on him. And then, of course, the other choice is get the chair out of the way. He's the subject of the picture. The chair isn't the subject of the picture, so I got the chair out of the way, and there you focused on him. So the next subject is composition. And composition is really where a lot of the artistry in photography comes in. It's where you have the choice of what you put in the picture and what you leave out. When you're taking a picture of something, you need to ask yourself, what is it I'm taking the picture of? What's the main subject? What am I trying to say? What is important in the scene and what is not important? If something isn't important, or if it's distracting, or if it's just trash, or if it's overhead lines, take that out. Get in another position. Zoom in closer. Get down. Get up farther. Figure out what you want in the picture before you hit the shutter. So here's some examples. The first one is watch your own shadow. It's easy, especially if you're using a wide angle lens, to get your own shadow in the picture on a sunny day. You're taking a picture, you're all excited about whatever it is you're taking a picture of. You look at it later and you go, oh, that's my head, or that's my foot. That's a shadow in the picture. Watch out for overhead lines. Watch out for, trash cans and garbage in the lawn. All that stuff will show up, and it's not necessarily something you want in the picture. Notice the background. This example I've got up here now shows a picture taken. I didn't take this picture, so it's not my fault. taking a picture of a person and there's a flagpole sticking out of both sides of her head. And that doesn't look right. You got to remember that a photograph is a two-dimensional depiction of a three-dimensional world. And so something that's behind you looks like can look like it's right, like sticking out of your head. And it's not something that you want. So through the magic of Photoshop, I was able to take that pole out of her head, and the second exposure there looks much better. So watch the background. It's better to try to correct things while you're on the scene rather than trying to correct them in your computer later. Watch the edges. There's two examples I just pulled up of when I took some pictures, and in one of them the reflector is shown on the edge of the picture. The other one, my shadow of my head shows up in the bottom of the screen. So watch the edges and get in closer. A picture is almost always improved by getting in closer. You can either move yourself in closer, walk up closer to the subject, or if you have zoom and a capacity to zoom in on the subject, you can do that. And that nearly always improves the final product. Change your camera view. I think we often, especially when we're using this kind of camera, we tend to always want to take a horizontal picture. So every picture you get back is horizontal. Well, maybe it might look better if you turn the camera vertical and took a picture that way. So there's a couple examples on the screen now of a picture I took both ways, one horizontal and one vertical. And sometimes I like the one better than the other, but it's nice to have that choice. I think with cell phones, we tend to want to take the picture this way because of the way the buttons are. Especially like videos, it seems like you want to take it this way, whereas a lot of times pictures may be better this way, especially video. Change your perspective. Get down low. That can sometimes make it just a much more interesting picture than just at your regular height, whatever height you are. That makes kind of a boring picture. And that's the scene that everybody sees, right? Is 5-6 feet up off the ground. Get down low, get 1 foot off the ground and look up at whatever your subject is. Or if you can, get up high and look down at your subject. So here's a couple of examples on the screen of changing your perspective. Another thing to think about when you're trying to compose a photograph is what's called the rule of thirds. And there's a illustration on the screen right now that shows you when you're looking through your viewfinder or in the back of your camera or however you're looking at the scene you're about to take a picture of, mentally in your brain divide it up into thirds, this way and this way. And if you can, try to put the main subject of your photograph off to 1/3 of the picture, off to the side, not right smack dab in the middle, either up a little, down a little, or over to each side. And those lines that you see on the illustration show you kind of what's called the sweet spots of taking pictures using the rule of thirds. And I say rule of thirds in quotes because it's a rule that can be broken. There's times when you want the main subject right in the middle of the picture for one reason or another. But try setting the subject off to the side. And there's some examples pulled up on the screen now of a little barn that I took a picture of. The first picture shows it right in the middle. It's kind of boring, I think. And then you see I've put the little barn, which is the main subject of the picture, off to one side, off to the left, and another one I put it up towards the top. And also in both of those other pictures where I'm using the rule of thirds, I've cut out the sky completely. Even though it's a nice sky, it's a pretty blue sky and it's got some nice clouds in it. The sky didn't really add to the picture, I didn't think. So I cut the sky out. So you don't always have to have the sky in the picture. So think about that. The next slide shows decide what your subject is. you see some trees and you see some whatever, and you think, oh, this is pretty. But what's the main subject of your picture? And in this example, it shows some trees and a bench, and it's really ugly. There's some shadow. There's no main subject in the picture. It's very boring. I tried it again where I put the tree kind of more at the top, but there's still a lot of grass and brush that's not interesting. So, why take a picture of that? So I took a picture again with the tree. That one tree is the main subject, and it's over to the left. There's not much of the brush at the bottom, which was boring. There's more of the sky, which is more interesting. So I took a couple pictures of the tree that way. So, figure out what your main focus of your picture is going to be when you compose your image. Another thing that's great to take pictures of is patterns. And if you look around, you see patterns in nature everywhere. And there's a few examples on the screen here. There's some flowers, and there's a repeating pattern of those flowers, which make like circles, all over the picture. Another one where it shows some purple flowers, and then there's a diagonal line there, and then you can see the orange leaves on the ground. So you get that diagonal composition. Another one where there's a little stream going through it, and the stream makes kind of an S pattern. And then the picture at the bottom is a fence line, and that fence line makes a Z. So patterns like that can make some really nice images. So look for patterns in nature when you're out looking for subjects. Another thing to think about is reflections and shadows. Reflections and shadows can make great pictures. They can also make terrible pictures. So, think about what you're doing. But the one example there shows the sky reflected in the water. It's like a mirror image, and it made a really nice picture. And the other example there is some shadows that the trees made in the winter, shadows on the snow. So those are some other things to look at when you're out searching around for subjects. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about are lenses, and I've referred to them a little bit in this workshop so far. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about them because what lens you use can really impact the look of your final picture. And there's lots of different kinds of lenses. The actual physical lenses that you see here on the table are called optical lenses, and they are real lenses. They exist in the real world. They're made out of a lot of glass. And there's different sizes. There's ones that would be called wide angle, and I'll explain the difference between these in a minute. This is wide angle lens. It's fairly short. There's kind of a medium lens, and then there's the telephoto lens, which is what you see here. And there's lots of different kinds that do different have different effects on your final image. And all of these three lenses are what you call zoom lenses. In other words, there's lots of different choices between this one, for instance, is 100 millimeters and it zooms out to 400 millimeters. And you see how it actually gets longer and longer as I zoom out. All of these lenses are zoom lenses. You can also buy what's called a fixed focal length lens, and that means that it doesn't change the aspect of the photo that you're taking. Wide angle lenses, like this one, will give you a picture that it shows you a great big wide angle of whatever the scene is that you're seeing. It'll actually be more than what you can see with your eyes. So when I'm sitting here looking ahead, I can see like about from here to here and all the way around. A wide angle lens will see what's actually kind of behind me and all the way around. So we'll take a great big sweeping view of this room. Kind of a medium one will take a kind of a more of what's here, and then maybe zoom out a little bit more. And then this telephoto lens will zoom out even more, so I can take a picture of a fly on the wall, and the fly will look pretty big. So the next slide I've got here shows examples of standing in one spot and using different lenses to take a picture of the same scene. And with a 24 millimeter lens, it shows a big wide angle. Then I went to 50 millimeters, 85 millimeters, 200 millimeters, and 400 millimeters. And you see the pictures that I ended up taking are much different from one another. In fact, if you look at the 24 millimeter picture and compare it to the 400 millimeter picture, it looks like it's a totally different scene. I mean, they don't look anything alike. There's not even the same subjects in the picture anymore. In the 24 millimeter scene, it's just a field with some trees. In the 400 millimeter picture, it's a tree and an old junk car. So it's a completely different picture. With the wide angle lens, I tried to take the same picture using different lenses. And with the 10 millimeter lens, you see, I took a picture of the porch, and the flowers in front look like they're quite a ways away from the chairs in the back. It looks like the porch is really long. In the 50 millimeter lens, you can see that the chairs are closer to the flowers. And I couldn't get all the chairs in the picture. With the 135 millimeter lens, the flowers look very close to the lens, and the chairs look like they've been moved way closer. It looks that it compresses the scene. So you can see that you can't take the same picture using different lenses. The lens itself makes the scene look different. So that's something to think about when you're taking a picture, is what is it you want to portray? Do you want it with a wide angle lens? Do you want to be able to get the wide scene? Do you want to make it look like things are very far away from each other? Or do you want a telephoto lens that makes things seem very compressed? And there's some more examples of taking a picture with a wide angle lens. There's 3 examples here. One is looking up at the trees, taking a picture with the sun coming through. And one thing about a wide angle lens is it will distort lines, and it'll make it seem like things are kind of falling in on themselves. So that worked out really well with this picture because it looks like the trees are kind of coming in. So it was kind of the effect that I wanted. The other picture shown here is of a dune, and the dune was a pretty big dune, but by using a wide angle lens, it made the dune look even bigger and broader than it really was. And then this other example here is of a tree, and using a wide angle lens, I was able to get the whole tree into the picture rather than just little pieces of it, which is what you would get if you took it with a telephoto lens. So then there's example of the problems that you have with wide angle lenses, in that it makes things seem like they're falling over. So there's one picture here of the lighthouse, and it looks like it's kind of falling over. So I corrected it in post-processing. I was able to straighten that lighthouse back up so it looks like it's up and down rather than falling over. It's okay to have the trees falling over, but the lighthouse you didn't want to have fall over. Now, when would you want to use a telephoto lens? There's lots of good reasons to want to use that. That's the long lens. On the one example here on the upper left, taking a picture of a rattlesnake. Yeah, you don't want to get that close to a rattlesnake. But I wanted you to be able to see the rattlesnake, so I used the zoom lens. Another example here is taking pictures of some musicians on the street, and rather than getting up real close to them, which is what I would have to do with a shorter lens, I used a telephoto lens, and I was able to zoom in on them, not bother them. They can still play the music. I'm not interfering with what they're trying to do. The other example here down at the bottom is the way that a telephoto lens enlarges subjects so that they are actually bigger than they are in real life. So the picture on the bottom is of a sunset, and by using a telephoto lens and zooming in on it, the sun looks really big, which really, is a pleasing picture in this particular case. So remember that the telephoto lenses enlarge things. And then that last example is a picture I took of a road, and it's a real hilly road in the fall. But by using a telephoto lens, it makes it seem like the hills are even hillier, because that compresses them, makes them seem like they're closer together. So it looks like the hills are like this. So that made a nice photograph too. Then there's the difference between digital zoom and optical zoom. And that's something that you should understand a little bit. And remember I said that these are optical zooms in that they exist in the real world. They so the actual lens zooms in and out and changes so that it can do the length that you want it to do. There's also what's called a digital zoom, and that you will find in a lot of these lower end cameras and also in your phone, where it'll say that it's zooming in on something, and so you'll zoom in, and you think that you're getting a better and better picture. You're getting closer to that bird or whatever it is you're trying to bring in closer. But what it's actually doing is it's not really getting closer to that subject. It's just cropping the picture. And so if you zoom in a lot on something, it's just cropping out everything else, and it's leaving you with a really low resolution image. And I'll show you an example here. It's a picture I took of my husband and my cat. And in the original image, there's the cat and there's my husband sitting there. And then I decided I wanted to zoom in on just the cat. So I used a digital zoom, zoomed in on just the cat. And you can see that it's a very low resolution picture. It's all washed out. The cat's eyes look like she's some kind of monster or something. It's just not a very good picture. So beware when you're zooming with a digital zoom. If you zoom a little bit, it's not a big deal, but if you really zoom a lot, you're losing a lot of information, and it's just not going to be the picture that you really wanted it to be. So here's an example of the optical zoom that I was telling you. That's the real zoom. I took a picture of some friends of mine using a wide angle picture. They're far away. You can see all the trees and the rocks and stuff. And then I zoomed in on just them, and you could see it's a whole different picture, especially since they stood up and mooned me at the end there. Then just a couple more things before I end. I want to talk a little bit about panoramic pictures because they've gotten to be so easy to do. It's just great. And what a panorama is, I think you can kind of figure that out. It's taking a picture where you get like this big wide scene of something. You know, you get this kind of long skinny picture where you can see all the mountains and the trees, and those are so cool, so neat to do. You can do them three different ways. One is with one of the higher end cameras. You can take like 2 or 3 or 5 pictures or whatever. Put your camera on a tripod. You take a picture here. You take a picture here, here, and then you stitch them together using some computer program. And that can turn out just great because it gives you a huge file because you're putting several pictures together. And so you'll get a nice big file and you'll be able to make a nice print from it. That's one way to do a panorama. The other is cell phones, especially now, will do panoramas in the camera, and they turn out really cool. I'll show you a couple examples of those. And they take a great big picture. You hit the panorama button and you slowly pan your camera across the scene, and then you hit it again. And you get this really neat picture at the end. The other way you can do panoramas in like a point and shoot like this is you can tell it to do a panorama, and basically it just takes one picture and it crops it. It crops it real long and skinny. So again, you're getting it's not a very good high resolution file, so it's not the greatest way to do a panorama. So here's a couple of examples. The one on top is a panorama I did taking 5 images with this camera and putting them together in the computer. And the one on the bottom is one that I took with my iPhone and just kind of zoomed across, and it did it itself. It was great. I just love to do those with the cell phone. They come out really cool. And a lot of times they'll be kind of distorted, in a neat way. And the people, especially on the edge, will look a little bit. Their faces will be a little bit moon shaped and stuff, but it can be a really neat effect. So that is all I have for you today. Now it's time for you to get out there and take pictures, practice. Practice, practice, practice. That's the only way you're going to learn. Don't be afraid of your camera. Go through all the buttons and whistles and figure out what it does and what it doesn't do, and see what you like and what you don't like and what works. And I've got a list of field assignments that I will ask GACA to post on their website, so you can have some exercises to do to practice some of these things that we've been talking about. So get out there, practice now, learn your camera so that you're ready to take pictures this fall. So thanks for listening, and hope to see you again soon.